They keep telling you the middle class is shrinking. That word is cute, innocent, accidental sounding, like it just wandered off, got lost, slipped on a banana peel somewhere between inflation and avocado toast. That is a lie. The middle class is not shrinking. It is being deleted. Shrinking implies nature. Deletion implies intent, and intent is exactly what this is. For decades, the middle class was the most dangerous thing in modern society. Not to dictators, not to warlords, to systems. A class of people with just enough money to say no, just enough education to ask why, just enough stability to refuse humiliation. So the system adjusted, not loudly, not violently, quietly, bureaucratically, respectably. No tanks, no coups, no slogans, just spreadsheets. Wages were frozen, but productivity doubled. Housing stopped being shelter and became an asset class. Education turned into lifelong debt. Healthcare became a subscription model for survival. And every time you noticed something was wrong, you were told it was your fault. You didn't work hard enough. You chose the wrong major. You didn't reskill. You didn't hustle. You didn't invest early enough. You didn't optimize yourself properly. Strange how the system is never wrong. Only you are. The middle class once meant something very specific. One income could support a family. Housing was boring. Not speculative retirement was expected. Not mythical children were a responsibility. Not a financial suicide pact. That version of the middle class is gone. Not because it was inefficient, because it was inconvenient. A population that owns homes, raises families, and expects dignity is expensive. A population that lives paycheck to paycheck is flexible. Desperate people don't strike. Tired people don't organize. People drowning in debt don't rebel. They negotiate with their own fear. So the system didn't collapse the middle class overnight. It hollowed it out. Same job titles, same resumes, same professional clothes, but no margin, no buffer, no future. You are not poor enough to qualify for help, not rich enough to escape, just stable enough to be milked indefinitely. That is not an accident. That is design. And here's the part they never want you to say out loud. If the middle class were merely shrinking, governments would try to save it. If it is being deleted, governments are managing the process. Carefully, slowly, with reassuring language. You are watching a class disappear in real time, while being told everything is fine because GDP is up and the stock market looks healthy. The middle class is not dying. It is being erased, line by line, policy by policy, while you are distracted by culture wars, identity arguments, and motivational nonsense. This is not an economic phase. This is a transition. And you are standing right in the middle of it. You were promised a deal. Study, work hard, stay loyal, and work would lead somewhere. That deal is dead. Modern work isn't designed to lift you into stability. It's designed to extract value while preventing escape. You work more hours than previous generations, under constant surveillance disguised as performance metrics. Companies no longer want workers who grow roots. They want workers who float, contracted, outsourced, flexible. Flexibility is a polite word for disposability. Your parents had a ladder, you have a treadmill. You can run faster, optimize your resume, collect certificates. You are still in the same place. Because productivity gains no longer flow to labor, they flow upward. So when you fail to achieve stability, you don't blame the structure, you blame yourself. Burnout is no longer a bug, it is a feature. A burned out worker doesn't resist, they survive week to week. A worker who can plan 5 years ahead is dangerous. A worker who can plan 5 days ahead is obedient. So no, work is not failing to save you. It has been re-engineered so it never could. The finish line was quietly moved out of existence. This is not a labor market, it is a containment system, and it pairs perfectly with what comes next. Because once work stops saving you, debt takes over. Debt used to be temporary, a bridge, a tool, something you passed through on the way to stability. Now it is permanent. That is not an accident. That is architecture. Today, wages barely cover survival, so debt fills a structural gap, not because you're irresponsible, but because the system is designed that way. Do the math they hope you never do. Rent eats up to half your income. Healthcare is one emergency from bankruptcy. Education is a luxury. Transportation, mandatory but unaffordable. If you try to live without debt, you don't live, you retreat. So debt steps in, wearing a friendly face. Student loans, credit cards, buy now, pay later, even installment plans for groceries. Debt doesn't scream, it whispers. Small monthly payments, low introductory rates, points, miles, rewards, until you realize your paycheck no longer belongs to you. It is pre-allocated before it arrives. Rent first, utilities next, minimum payments after that. What remains is called discretionary, as if choosing between protein and rest were a lifestyle choice. Debt is obedience without guards. A worker with no debt can quit. A worker with debt negotiates with fear. And fear is the most reliable management tool ever invented. Notice how debt follows you everywhere, but ownership doesn't. You can finance a phone instantly, a car you don't own, an education that doesn't guarantee income. But try to finance stability. Try to finance housing at a reasonable price. Try to finance health. Suddenly the system becomes conservative, risk-averse. Risk is for you, not for them. And here's the genius of it. Debt individualizes failure. If you struggle, it's not because wages collapsed. It's because you borrowed too much. You made a bad decision. Systemic extraction is reframed as personal weakness. Meanwhile, entire industries exist to harvest interest from this desperation. Banks don't need you to succeed. They need you to continue. Not defaulting, not escaping, continuing. Debt keeps you working jobs you hate, silent when conditions worsen, and polite while being squeezed. It also delays adulthood. People postpone marriage, children, home ownership, not because they hate responsibility, but because they are already carrying invisible chains. A society buried in debt doesn't revolt. It copes. It argues about culture instead of power. Debt is not an unfortunate side effect of modern life. It is the mechanism that replaced the middle class's old security. And once you understand that, the next step becomes obvious. If debt controls the present, assets control the future, and the future has been quietly locked away. The middle class used to own things, homes, pensions. That ownership was the entire point. Assets did one dangerous thing for ordinary people. They decoupled survival from obedience. If you owned a home, rent could not threaten you. If you had a pension, your boss could not. So assets had to go, not confiscated, repriced. Housing didn't become scarce. It became financialized. Homes stopped being places to live and became vehicles for capital storage. You're not competing with families. You are competing with spreadsheets. The same thing happened to retirement. Pensions were replaced with individual accounts tied to volatile markets. Now your old age depends on forces you do not control. Assets were not redistributed. They were consolidated upward. And here's the key truth. Wages alone do not create wealth. Assets do. When asset ownership is locked behind impossible entry costs, the middle class becomes a temporary condition. You can do everything right and still lose. That is not failure. That is exclusion. The system does not want you to catch up. It wants you renting your entire life, investing what little you have into markets that reward those who already own everything. The middle class is not shrinking because people are lazy. It is being deleted because ownership was quietly taken off the table, because a class that owns nothing cannot defend itself. Here is the part they never debate on television. A society without a middle class is easier to run. At the top, asset owners. Money works for them. At the bottom, the permanently insecure, too busy surviving to coordinate. The middle layer used to be the shock absorber. The group that believed tomorrow would be better than today. That belief was expensive, so it had to go. Instead, you are offered substitutes, credit instead of income, narratives instead of solutions. You are encouraged to fight each other over symbols, while ownership quietly concentrates. Anything except top versus bottom. Because a united middle class would ask why productivity gains never reach wages, why housing is priced for investors, not residents. A deleted middle class does not revolt, it adapts downward, it internalizes blame, it calls survival resilience. Until you realize you didn't fall out of the middle class. It was a temporary arrangement that worked too well for ordinary people. Once you understand the middle class is being deleted, not eroded, your confusion disappears. You are not crazy. You are living through a controlled demolition. And the most dangerous moment is when people realize it was never an accident,